but his kit, like what we got going on in here, was pretty fun. It was interesting, similar to the Tomb Lords, this thing was less important than it is for most other factions because they've got no upkeep. Most factions really love getting the thing at the end of the blue line because it reduces the upkeep for all their armies, but these guys have no upkeep, so it was kind of whatever. Also, this was basically a permanent version of the bird spell, always around them, which was quite powerful as well. So it was pretty cool. I also feel I got very lucky that I got this. This is a random item. This wasn't a quest item called Trollhide, which is a Beastman only armor that gives you regeneration. So getting this at like level on like turn 1 or turn 2, crazy good. I never found another one. That was really nice, and I had it on this guy for a while, and I had it on his sidekick for a while, and it was extremely useful to have that. Moving on, we eventually got the ability to confederate the other legendary lords. Now, only the dwarves have I seen another faction where you can confederate all of the other legendary lords within your faction, no matter where they are on the map, and even if they're dead. That was crazy. So by using this dread system, we also, even if you didn't have enough army space for them, even if your max amount of armies was still 1, I was able to pick up Morgur. And then when I didn't have enough space, I got Torox. I didn't have enough space, I got Khazrak, found out he was dead, and it brought him back to life on the map, and I was able to get Khazrak. That was pretty neat. For example, if you play the Warriors of Chaos, it's pretty easy to confederate Norska. You just got to beat them in a fight, and then they respect strength, and you get them. But these guys, like, you confederated them. Like, I got Torox on another continent. Like, I was over here, and we got Torox over here, and then I started moving him around. That was pretty neat. So the confederation system, extremely powerful for these guys. And because of that, I have a pretty good idea of how I'd say 3 of their campaigns go. Although Torox has the Rivers of Blood thing, which I don't really like, I got to play Torox without having to deal with the Rivers of Blood mechanic. It's kind of like the Khorne mechanic. You mean Vassalize Norska? Yes, Vassalize, sorry. This right here, it's kind of half behind me. There's this bar. Anytime they're not in fights, this drains out. It's their rage. And when the rage is high, one of the things they get is replenishment, even if they are in enemy territory. Usually, if something says it boosts replenishment, it just means it boosts replenishment when you're in an area where you can get replenishment. Not suddenly it'll work in an enemy territory. So it was a very nice surprise when I realized that we could be in ambush stance in enemy territory and still recovering health in missed units. So that was really cool once we figured that out. I was like, okay, so then I started prioritizing the rage a little bit. That was cool. The Herdstone mechanic, really didn't like it. However, I understand the need for it. If it wasn't for the Herdstone mechanic, they would just they would just run around like crazy, and you would never been able to pin these guys down. But because they make a Herdstone and then they have to stay around it for a little while, or if they abandon it, they will suffer a setback for that. It allows you to try to pin them down. Otherwise, they would constantly just be like raiding, destroy that, raiding, destroy that, raiding. And, you know, it would be just a constant nuisance. It would be, well, kind of like the Changeling. The Changeling is really hard to pin down, and that would be similar to that. So, I like Torox if he's not my main lord. I could totally see myself playing Morgur or Malagor again. They were both fun. Morgur, he's mainly just like an attack bot, and he's very slow because he never gets a mount, but he has the constant damage around him. He gets regen. He's 75% resistant to missiles, and he gets those Profane Blessing ancillaries, which was like the Blessing of Filth, which put horrible regen on a unit, and I put it on a Regiment of Renown in his group, and it did really well. So if I played him again, I would prioritize the first and second blessing. These were really good. An Abstraction of Tzeentch, which makes puts horrible regen on the Chaos Spawns, which made these things. You guys remember that one battle where I fought Durthu, the big tree guy? The only things in that pile that stayed alive the whole battle were the Chaos Spawns. Even though they only have 10 freaking armor, they had horrible regen and just kept coming back to life. And that was incredibly helpful. How much physical resistance do they have? Do they have any phys resist? Spell, missile, unbreakable. Good God. I think they might have 0 physical resistance and only 10 armor. But Yeah, they stayed alive. They stayed alive all that long. A decent defense. Not great, but decent defense. So yeah, Malagor and Morgur, like him. Torox, he's okay. I don't want him as my main because I don't like the corn mechanic. Kazrak, definitely glad I got him last. I didn't get to see him much because I got him near the end, but just looking at his kit and looking at his quest items, I'm very like, eh. It's very whatever. He's just a melee unga bunga. I'm glad I picked the other guys over this guy. So got the opportunity to try all the legendary lords out. An opportunity I haven't had since when we played Norska. There's only 2 of them, but we got to confederate the other guy when we beat him in a fight. I was playing the troll and we confederated the barbarian guy who was riding a mammoth. So I got to play both of them in the same campaign, so I got to experience both of them on my first playthrough. So not since then have I gotten to do something like this. The dwarves, I got to play like 3 of the 5 or something. So let's see. We talked about the herdstones. We talked about so we did talk about dread. So dread, it's like, okay, your units are completely free, so there needs to be a way to limit you from just getting an army full of the strongest thing in the game, and it's this system. So like, you know, if you want to get an additional incarnate elemental of beast, you need to buy this multiple times for each time you want to do that, and that's, you know, that's across all armies. So that what I just did is 1 more incarnate in 1 army. Or increasing the number of heroes if you want to have a bunch of heroes. I'm assuming the cost increases when you buy it. Yes, after a couple of purchases, the cost starts going up. And stuff like that. Wolfric, yeah, Wolfric was the guy on the mammoth, yes. And there's even some items over here too. None that really got me that excited, but there are some items here that you can buy. Actually, this right here, probably should have gotten this for all my armies over time. It increases movement range, which is really nice. But most of the other stuff here, I was just kind of like, whatever. So the dread system was okay. It was pretty easy to get dread over time. You know, it piled up just by playing the game. It did not require you to go out of your way to get it in the same way that this up here required you to go out of your way to do the herdstone thing. But again, I understand what the herdstone was for. It was to make you actually have to focus on a mechanic in an area and not just run around like crazy, causing everybody no ends of trouble. So dread was fine. This was new. So they have a research tree, just like everybody else, but their research is required weird mechanics. For example, summon 10 units in battle. Perform 5 successful hostile hero actions. Win a battle with 4 heroes in your army. So basically, to get these unlocked, you had to do things. And many of them I unlocked by accident. But I don't think I've played any other faction where you had to do like an achievement to unlock stuff on the research tree. That was new. Don't think I've ever seen that before, and I don't know if anybody else has that at all, unless I just haven't seen them yet. There's a couple of factions I haven't seen yet. Let's see. Let's talk about the units. So, like, let's go to an army here and open this up. Okay, the units. Their bread and butter units were the Ungors, who had very poor leadership and were labeled expendable. They broke and ran away very easily, almost like Skaven. So they were very much like the trash units. So everything else was substantially better. Despite the fact that I've played Tzeentch before, I had never used Zangors before, so I actually got to try them out for the first time. I really liked them, and I will absolutely use them again if I get the opportunity in the future. The Zangors, basically, they power up as anybody casts spells. Anywhere on the map. The enemy, you, whatever, makes them stronger. And they were pretty good just on their own. The Pestigors, the Goreherds, all this stuff was good. The Centrigors are okay. I don't really love the Centrigors. They're kind of like... They're faster than the infantry units, but they're not as fast as wolves. And they're tankier than wolves, but they're not as tanky as your frontline units. So they're like a bruiser or a brawler. They're like an in-between. They're in between like a frontline unit and a wolf unit. And they have their uses. I didn't really love them because, you know, I like the stuff that kind of excels at one thing. And I kind of bend the rules on that when they've got like horrible regen or something which is crazy sustain, which the Centrigors did not. So they were okay, and I used them because, you know, they were worth a slot, and they were certainly much better than the Ungors, but they were all right. And then after that, we're hitting, you know, like the Chaos Spawns were really good in that one guy's army that gave them all horrible regeneration. The Minotaurs were kind of good everywhere, but they were really good in the army where they were getting all the buffs from the Minotaur guy. And then the tier 5 stuff, we only got a couple of those. So the Incarnate Elemental was, of course, good. The Cygor is great on any big open map, or actually, in some cases, he could be good in a city battle because his super long range boulder throw thing, he could destroy towers and walls with it, but he couldn't like hit guys behind the wall. It didn't arc enough. I never really saw a Jabberslythe in a fight. But I've looked at its kit. It's basically just a melee dude, and he has a damage aura around him if he's in that one legendary lord's army, and he has a vortex that he can activate with a cooldown that only recharges while he is in melee. If he's not in melee, the cooldown's not recharging. So he has a little whirlwind around him attack. And then the Gorgon. I did use a Gorgon once when I played Norska. So this is the second time I've used a Gorgon. Very, very strong dude. It has regen. It's only going when he's in melee, though. And he is such a big freaking target. I frequently had to pull him back so he didn't die. So despite the fact that he was a huge powerhouse and he did have a in melee regen, he was just a big fat target. So I had to keep an eye on him. He wasn't just like throw him in there, let him cause chaos and forget about him. You could not do that. I think that's pretty much it. As you can see here, there's not like a ton of variety. Like just to compare it, look, that's the Warriors of Chaos. Now they probably have the most variety. Here's the Wood Elves. The vampires don't have a lot, and then we've got the Beastmen. So they're not a lot here. I don't know how often they've been updated compared to some of the others. They don't have a lot of variety, but they were all right. Let's see. Talked about the units, talked about the lords, heroes. It was kind of difficult. I guess if I had focused on it, it would have been okay. I didn't really focus on getting heroes. But if I had, made the building and then increased the cap, I could have probably gotten more out. I had some running around the field, but I just did not do a good job at that. So not that bad in that regard. Kind of makes me wonder if you could make an army of just like all heroes. Because like some factions, like the ones where you can do something to keep, repeatedly increasing the cap of it with no end in sight. I'm wondering if you focused on it, if you could make an army that just had like a ton of Wargors in it, or a ton of Gorbals in it, which of course are quite powerful if they level them up. So, a Brave Shaman, you just need one or two, because that's just like your caster. You don't need a ton of those. But the melee dudes, the melee specialists, if you can get a bunch of those, could be nasty. Some factions are also limited because of the lore and what Games Workshop allows CA to make. Oh, sure. I'm just sharing my thoughts here. Diplomacy. It was new not being able to talk to people. Like, even the rats can talk to people, but like I was able to make friends with almost nobody. There was a couple of others, and honestly I ended up betraying them usually because we were just raiding everywhere, but we were not able to do much of that. But yeah, due to how powerful they were, you had an offensive ambush, a defensive ambush, you could replenish health even in enemy territory. We were able to just punch through some crazy areas that I would not have dared been so reckless with other factions. Plus other factions, you got to keep an eye on your cities, not get too far from them, or they could swing around and destroy them when you're not there, stuff like that. But yeah, these guys were pretty fun. Don't think it's like my new favorite thing or anything like that. They've got some strengths, they got some weaknesses. There's definitely some things they're not as good at as the other factions, but it's definitely fun, and I definitely understand them a whole lot better now. If I were to ever play it again, definitely be Malagor or Morgor. Those were my favorite two. Torox, very fun as a secondary army. I just don't like keeping track of his corn mechanic or Rivers of Blood or whatever it's called. And then Kazrak is very much a +1. He's a friend of a friend. He only came to the party because he was friends with somebody who was already there. All right, well, I think with that, I'm going to put down the Beastmen campaign. We achieved the short victory condition. I've basically seen pretty much everything except the Jabberslythe, and this is kind of whatever. So with that, I am going to rest it here. And we will be starting with one of the remaining factions I haven't played yet in the next one.